So today I am, I have the pleasure of having a conversation with a guest sitting in Cancun, Mexico, but is also from maybe similar to me, from a diverse international background, and also a someone with a kind of a diverse portfolio of different engagements and different things that he is into and will share with us today. So it's my pleasure to welcome Nazar Yasin. Thank you for being here, Nazar.
Hey, Danny, great to be here. And it's okay. You could just say I'm weird. It's okay. You can just, cut to the chase and say I got a weird guy on my show today. It's totally fine.
And weird is good. I sometimes even depends to who, but I describe myself as weird. So we can we can be friends already. I might surprise you here, but the first thing I did my research, around you and what you do and what you're into. I did find music in your portfolio
Oh yeah.
of different things that you spend time doing. So, and I maybe I'm saying this humbly, but I clicked on a couple of songs on Spotify, and I just kept listening because I was working and was playing it in the background, and I definitely liked a couple of them. I
Oh
definitely
man, you and I are going to be friends. You and I are going to be really good friends. Yeah, no, I love music. Music is it's spiritual for me. It's a cathartic activity, helps me feel connected to not only myself but to other people. It's a way that I process emotions and thoughts, and it's really personal and meaningful to me. I love music. Obviously there's in life you go through this process of thinking about, like, what am I good at, what am I passionate about, and what can I make a living at. And I'm super passionate about music. I'm not very good at it, and I definitely can't earn a living. So it's a hobby rather than my livelihood, but I do love it. It's great.
So, but the creation of it is like something you enjoy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I write songs all the time about things that, are happening to me. Sadly, a few weeks ago, we lost my father. My dad passed away after a multi-year battle with cancer. So we knew it was coming, but when it hits you, you can mentally prepare for something, but then when the thing actually happens, your heart takes over, and it's obviously quite sad. And a way that I have dealt with it is as I wrote my dad a song, and I was able to play the song for him while he was on his deathbed, and express how I feel about him and his journey in life and what it means to me. And music is just a wonderful tool to be able to channel those kinds of emotions and thoughts for me. So I love it. Yeah.
And have you study music in any way, like deeper than most people would?
No, completely self-taught. When I was 13, 14 years old, I heard other music before, but when I first heard Pearl Jam, I was like, oh my God, what is this? This guy's voice and these lyrics and like the
Yeah,
emotion behind this, like, what is this? And so, that really sort of set me off on, like,
yeah.
I don't know.
Nothing, man. Nothing, man.
Oh yeah. I mean, Black, Alive, Even Flow, like the whole 10 album. I was just blown away by, and I was like, I got to learn how to do this. And so I just, you know, got the cheapest guitar I could. It's like a $20 kind of acoustic guitar, and I didn't have a teacher or anything, and I just sit there and just play stuff, and then try to, like, listen to songs on the radio and see if I could kind of mime it. And after a few years of that, just started kind of inventing my own little hooks and things. And then I just love writing songs. It's like some people write poetry or some people journal. I write songs, and so I've written, I don't know, over 100 songs, and I just love the process of writing the lyrics and constructing a melody and constructing like a verse and a chorus and a bridge, and kind of the song composition process is like, it's this fun little puzzle of, like, how do you fit things together? I've got this thought and this melody, and it's connected to this thought and this melody, but it needs a transition, and things like that. So it's just a fun process.
And is it so everything you create is the original stuff that just comes to you, including the sounds, including the melody, including everything?
Yeah, I play everything, and for good friends, I write them songs for important events in their life. So a good friend of mine got married this last summer in Ireland, and I wrote a song for the wedding. And I've written songs for several friends of mine's weddings, like about the groom and the bride, and their relationship, and they're a little funny and a little sweet, and they're intended to kind of be well received by the bride and the groom, and people who attend the wedding. So I do that. It's kind of a fun thing I do for friends.
Yeah, so fun. So Nazar, so if you like don't mind, kind of giving your background, like where you're from, what your story is, and then we can dive into the different projects that you are working on.
Yeah. So I'd say probably the most accurate way to describe me is I'm a very purpose-driven person and always have been since I was a kid, and part of that came from my family. My family is a very purpose-driven family. And what I mean by that is my grandfather, I'm half Greek and half Libyan. And on both sides of my family, there's like this big civic duty history. And on my Libyan side, my grandfather founded the country of Libya. And so, Libya was never a country until the end of World War II. And he led the Libyan resistance against the Axis powers, and afterwards helped to sign the documents establishing Libya as a country. And then on the Greek side of my family, several second cousins and great uncles have been prime minister of Greece in the past. And so, there's this sort of strong sense in my family of like, hey, like you're living your life, but it's not just for you. Like do stuff for other people, right? Do things that matter in the world. Try to make your fellow man better through what it is you're doing in life. And that's just always been a strong undercurrent in my family. And then, growing up, sadly, as a kid, I went through a trauma, and the trauma, anytime you go through a childhood trauma, it makes you ask big questions in life, right? Like, why am I here? Why did this happen to me? Like, did I deserve this? Is the world a good place, a bad place? Those sorts of questions. Some might call them spiritual questions. And, that process, that thought process just kind of reinforced this idea of like, hey, look, like, you're on this planet, but like this planet doesn't owe you anything. You owe this planet things, right? Like you got to make it count. You got to earn your way here, and you got to kind of prove to the world that you deserve to be, that you deserve to exist here, right? And so that was kind of a, sort of a second step in my story. And then I just committed myself to basically learn as much about everything as I possibly could and find like which direction should I point myself in, that could maximize my positive impact in the world. And so I went to engineering school, I went to law school, I went to business school, met a lot of people, traveled all around the world trying to like figure out what to do, and ultimately decided that, technology and like the business of technology is kind of like the direction that I'm probably best suited to. And, I spent time growing up in California and then on the island of Cyprus, which I know you're familiar with, your neighbors to Cyprus. And so
like Florida, Cuba.
Yeah, totally. Right. Yeah. Little island in the middle of or the eastern side of the Mediterranean where, most of the people there aren't actually from there. They're from other places. And so I remember having come from Silicon Valley, earlier in my childhood to Cyprus. I was like, this is so interesting. Like all these people from all over the world, from Israel, from Russia, from England, from Germany, from Nigeria, from Egypt, from Lebanon, from all these places, they're all super smart. And they have all these great ideas. How come all these technology companies in the world are all in California at the time? I just couldn't square that circle. I was like, this doesn't make sense. And so, this is right around when like the internet was becoming a thing. And I was like, you know what? This is going to be this big transformative force in the world. It's going to democratize access to so many things. I've got to be a part of this. And so that's what I decided to point myself in the direction of. And so, I became the CEO of a young social networking company. This is in the, mid to late 2000s. And this is in the early days of social networking. And, all of us who were in, early social network people, we thought that we're going to make the world a better place. Because if you put everybody online together, everybody's going to get along. And then, there's going to be less kind of bad stuff in the world. And so, somewhat naive in that belief. But, grew the company to 100 million users. And, we made a lot of money, $100 million in revenues per year.
What was it? What was the network?
Yeah, it's still in operation. It was the biggest social network in Russia and Eastern Europe. The brand name's Odnoklassniki. Now it's OK.ru in Russia. Became this big social network and we got acquired for $1 billion, which was like back then, this is in 2010, like that was we're a unicorn, and the word unicorn didn't exist, and billion-dollar outcomes did not happen very frequently. And we were one of the first, unicorns outside the United States. It was a really big deal. And then I was like, well, this is great. Like, I made some money, I've established a name for myself. Like, what can I do now? And, our two investors were these two big investment firms, DST and Tiger Global. And I joined Tiger, based in New York as a partner, investing, trying to build this private investment business of theirs, investing in startups all around the world. And I was like, this is so exciting, because now I get to go to all these underrepresented markets, places like India and Brazil and Mexico and Nigeria and China at the time, that didn't have a lot of venture capital, but that had amazing entrepreneurs, and also these like big inefficiencies in their markets, right? Because if you have a country like we get used to in the United States, like things just working, right? There's like a postal system, and roads work, and there's FedEx, and there's banks, and there's access to credit and credit cards and things like that. And in many countries, those things don't exist in the same way, right? And the government doesn't do as good a job of providing that infrastructure. And so the business community, the private sector, has to kind of step up in place of the public sector and provide those services. And so if you can find the right entrepreneurs building the right things, then you can build huge companies that actually like do a lot of good in the world, right? And so this idea of, I can be this profits with a purpose person in the world. Like, I don't have to be this do-gooder who's poor, and I don't have to be this business person who's a butthead. I can do good things and make money at the same time. And, I've always thought it was this kind of false choice in life, that you either have to choose to be like a missionary or a mercenary, right? Like, why can't you, have abundance, and why can't you be prosperous while you're doing good things for your fellow man? And that idea has always been like, kind of front and center of how I've made decisions in life. Excuse me. Recovering from this flu thing I got. And pardon me.
So is it from your experience, working in all these emerging markets, is how you define them, right?
Yeah.
Or underrepresented markets in all these different countries internationally. Does the same talent exist? Do you believe?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just look at like, what are the US's most successful startups, and where were those people? Where did they grow up? Elon Musk is South African.
India, South Africa.
Founders of Stripe are Irish. Like, half of Silicon Valley is Indian. Like, tons of Israeli founders. Like, tons of African, entrepreneurs and investors. Latin American, and so there's talent from all over. Chinese. Like, there's tons of talent all over the world, and some of that talent comes to the US, and then these are highly skilled, highly educated immigrants who then go on to found these huge companies. And, increasingly people are saying, well, why don't I just do this in my home market? Like, now that, the world's a little bit more democratized, and I can get access to capital and things like that. So you can find amazing entrepreneurs. We've been lucky at my firm. I left Tiger and started my own firm called Rise Capital. And we've been lucky to be involved in several unicorns all around the world, and back some really amazing founders. And then, it's been very rewarding work doing that. But then a funny thing happened during COVID is COVID happens, the world basically like resets, right? All of a sudden there's dolphins in the canals in Venice, and like in India, from New Delhi, you can see the mountains and stuff. And like, it's like, whoa, like the world's different when we kind of take a breath. And at the same time, so many people, went through a really hard time during COVID, including my family, right? My wife lost both of her parents. I lost a friend, lost a entrepreneur, who I was on the board of. He passed away during COVID. Other entrepreneurs and founders that I work with, they'd call me up and they'd be like despondent and depressed. Like, hey, I'm alone and stuck in my apartment. I can't even go to the office and like chat with people at my company. I'm single, alone, like depressed. Like, what do I do? And so I started thinking, and I was like, you know what? Like, I've always gotten through hard times, including like my childhood trauma, by having like a clear sense of purpose in life, right? By being, what many would call spiritual, by having a sense that like, I'm connected to the rest of humanity, and I'm connected to this world somehow. And I'm going to, point myself in a direction where I feel like I am fulfilling my, duty or destiny in life, kind of thing. And so how can I help people around me, tap into that same thing? And so I just did a lot of research.
Up till that point, with all your traveling and again, success that you've seen
Yep.
in your career, did those spiritual questions always follow you, and is that something that you've
Always.
kind of kept on the back burner in your life?
Always, and people don't understand the word spirituality. Perhaps as I'm using it is not how people listening to your
And
podcast.
I touched on that sometimes. I always touched on it offline. How there are these negative connotations when it comes to the word spirituality.
Totally. And so when you use the word spiritual, oftentimes, right, is people hear one of two things. They're like, okay, either this is some woo-woo kind of thing, or it's like some kind of like dark arts kind of thing. Like, what are you talking about? And spirituality, the definition of spirituality, it's a psychological definition, right? You've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we have physiological needs, right? Our bodies need to be fed and nourished and sleep and things like that. We have mental needs, right? We need to feel some kind of sense of belonging and esteem in the world. And then we have what are called spiritual needs. And these are the needs to feel like we have some purpose in life, that we're here for a reason, that we're connected to something bigger than ourselves. It's just a psychological thing. And it's no different, than, I live in a world of, entrepreneurs and tech and VCs and stuff like that. And, not what I'd call, woo-woo people at all, very sort of metrics based and like, give me the numbers and the facts kind of stuff. And the way that I explain it to people in that community is I say, look, the same way that if you want to get your body healthy, you do a thing called exercise, right? And exercise can be anything. It can be going on a walk with your dog. It could be mountain biking. It could be, doing a HIIT routine at home. It could be playing pickup basketball. It could be anything. There's so many ways to exercise. If you want to organize those activities, if you want to organize that exercise into some kind of like, regimen with like specific rules and regulations and, maybe even uniforms and specific teams and things like that, that's called sport, right? Spirituality is just exercise for your brain, is what the science and the research says. It's just a way of activating a part of your brain called the parietal cortex. And if you activate that part of your brain, you are 80% less likely to experience anxiety, depression, addiction, or even suicide ideation, like the ideation of suicide. And so
is it a specific part of the brain that responds to spirituality?
Yeah. So as I was mentioning a minute ago, like when I was during COVID and researching this subject matter, like, okay, like how do you find purpose? Like how does that work? Like what's that called? Okay, well, the spirituality, the psychology behind it. I kept running into the same names of researchers who were doing all this research. And this is pretty new research. This is like the last 10 years of researchers who've looked into this. Like what happens when you do like purposeful activity, like spiritual activity? What happens when you meditate, when you pray, when you volunteer, when you say daily affirmations, when you do journaling exercises, when you do yoga, like when you do these things where there's an intention to connect with something bigger than yourself, what happens to your brain? And what they found is, what I described is, it activates this part of your brain called the parietal cortex. It's a specific part of the brain. And when you activate that part of your brain, it's like building a muscle. Is when you do that activity, that part of your brain grows. And when it grows, when it gets thicker, you end up being 80% less likely to experience anxiety or depression or addiction or suicide. And so it's a health thing. And so like now McKinsey talks about this, and even the US Army has instituted a spiritual fitness routine for all soldiers, right, as part of their training. And so it was this interesting realization I had during COVID. I was like, okay, I got to talk to these researchers and understand this more. And one of them in particular is Dr. Lisa Miller. She's a professor at Columbia University, and she founded actually the first Ivy League institute of spiritual research called the Spirituality Mind Body Institute at Columbia. And she's written all these books, The Awakened Brain and The Spiritual Child, and they're New York Times bestsellers and stuff like that. So I contacted her. I was like, help me understand this research. Like, what are you actually saying in this research? Am I understanding this the right way? And she explained it. She's like, yeah, this is how it works. Here are like the actual, like images of like a brain. It's like, this is your brain and this is your brain on drugs kind of thing. This is your brain without spiritual activity. This is your brain with spiritual activity. And this is what happens. And this is how it changes your body chemistry. And I was like, so this is a health thing. I was like, this isn't some woo-woo thing. This is like, it's the equivalent of like when we moved out of farms and into cities as a species, we suddenly had to like develop exercise routines, right? Like if you lived on a farm, you didn't exercise because your entire day is walking around and milking cows and doing physical stuff. When you move off the farm and you're in the city, suddenly you need like a gym and a place to like go to exercise, right? So it's like, so now in this world that we live in with all this social media and all this distraction, all this information overload, like we need a new form of exercise. And she's like, yeah, that's exactly it. It's like a new form of exercise.
So it's easy for, people to visualize, someone exercising physically, lifting weights, for example, or running. So how can we help people visualize spiritual exercise?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Like to do spiritual exercise, you need to do three things. It's three things: is reflection, connection, and inspiration. So let me like double click on each one of those things. Reflection is the act of like just taking a minute to like look at yourself and evaluate your own emotions and strengths and weaknesses. Some people do this through journaling. Some people do this through meditation. Other people do it through like, quiet or darkness retreats or things like that. There's no one right way to do it. Like the whole point is like, take a breath, take a minute. How am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? Like what happened? What's the story I'm telling myself in my head? Is that the right story? Okay, like let me get a sense of myself. So reflection, that's one thing.
And on reflection, I can only imagine how many people don't reflect. Do you think it's you think that in many people that, that part of the brain that, that muscle in, quote unquote in the brain has almost atrophied? Because even, for myself, and I don't know how I compare to other reflectors out there, it's hard to...
Yeah.
It's almost like, it's easier for me to go on a 60-minute run than a 10-minute reflection journey.
Totally. And by the way, you can do both at the same time. That's actually what I do, right? Because I have the same hard time that it sounds like you have in terms of, just sitting down and trying to meditate or do something like that. I'm like not a natural meditator. And in this day and age, it's really hard to be a natural meditator because we're bombarded by, our phones are blowing up. We got social media stuff. There's always something going on, right? So what I do, my meditation is I go on a run in the morning. I go on a run in nature and I put my AirPods in, but I don't play any music or anything like that. I put them in so that people won't talk to me. I put them in so I can be left alone with my thoughts as I'm on a run. And I'm just breathing and listening to my breath and my footsteps. And, oh, there's a bird flying, and listen to that bird song. And, oh, wow, the sun's shining through those trees over there. Wow, that's really lovely. That's amazing. And just being present during my run, just being there during my run is my period of reflection. And
but then reflection doesn't have to be questioning yourself or questioning your thoughts, or because is that because what you described now as your run is not the same as maybe you mentioned earlier, where you would ask yourself, are my thoughts intact with what I want? Are these like looking in the mirror in terms of what your brain is telling you?
Being present is self-introspection and self-understanding. Because if you're, for example, on a run, okay, like, why am I stressed out this morning? I feel a little stressed out. What's going on? Right? Like, you use that time to kind of better understand how you're feeling, what your breath's like. You're there in the moment. You're not distracted by other things, if that makes sense. And so, you can do that through journaling. You can do that through meditation. You can do that through, any number of, there's a lot of different ways to reflect on how you're feeling and what you're thinking. There's no one right answer, much like there's no one way to exercise, right? You can exercise by doing push-ups or by playing pickup basketball. It doesn't matter. They're both exercise, right? So you can reflect in many different ways. The second thing is really connection. Is, we've trained ourselves, again, because of social media, we've trained ourselves now to think that if you just like somebody's post, on Instagram or something like that, oh, I was in touch with my friend and like, wow, what a good friend I am. That's not real connection. Like, liking somebody's post is not real connection. Real connection is actually intentionally taking the time to check in on somebody, right? To do something kind for somebody, And, these last few weeks for me, I mentioned my father passed away. My real friends have checked in on me, in some cases, like repeatedly, just like, hey, just thinking about you. How's it going? How are you feeling? How are you and the family dealing with this? I know it's a hard time. I'm here to talk if you need to, right? Like that is connection, like the intentional, compassionate action and support of other people. That is connection. That's a core part of spiritual exercise is connection. And the third part is inspiration. It's fostering some sense of wonder and meaning with something greater than yourself, right? You can get that through being in nature, right? So when I go on this morning run in nature, I'm kind of ticking a few boxes, right? Because like I'm in nature and getting inspired by the sunrise that I see or by the bird song and whatever. And I also have, because it's a 30-minute, 40-minute run, I also have enough time to kind of think about things and like, okay, how am I feeling and why am I feeling that way, right? So inspiration you can do that through prayer, you can do that through astrology, like feeling connected to something bigger than yourself. You can do that through, nature. You can do that through any number of ways. Again, there's no one way to do it. And this is what the science says, is there's no one way, there's no one correct way to do any of these things. And so when I learned about all this, during, my interviews with these researchers during, sort of the COVID period, I was like, this is amazing, right? Because like for the first time, the research is giving people the permission to talk about spirituality, to talk about purpose, to talk about this sort of like the very top of Maslow's hierarchy need, which it's kind of been a taboo subject to talk about for the last 20 years. Like you bring up spirituality at a dinner table and like you can hear the cutlery. Suddenly like everybody's like, uh-oh, where's this conversation going, right? And it's just
another weirdo.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, here we go. There's going to be some like woo-woo weird conversation.
Yeah.
It's just a health thing. Like what the science says is, if you do spiritual stuff, it makes you healthier, less anxious, less depressed.
So just, like those, negative connotations around spirituality and these, the three, key points of exercising spirituality, which reflection, connection, and inspiration.
Yeah.
Is that, could those things tap into something negative or something not beneficial to oneself or to people around them? And all like just examples, like I'm thinking like a sports team, the Nazi party, religion, cults. So can one be exercising those things but to the dark side of the force?
It could, and that's why important caveat when you're sort of on the inspiration side of things, it's you're tapping into something greater than yourself, some force for good greater than yourself, right? Not some kind of force for evil greater than yourself. Otherwise, like you're certainly not exercising compassion muscles if you're a Nazi, right? You're certainly not caring for your fellow man, right? And that's not spiritual, right? So spirituality is it's doing things with good intention for yourself, for your fellow humankind, and for the world that you live in. That is spiritual, and that's common across every religion, basically, right? So,
yep. Are you religious at all?
I'm not religious. I come from a multi-faith family. My dad's Libyan, my mom's Greek, and they raised us to just hey, look, there's a bunch of books, right? There's a bunch of ways of doing this around the world. Just read and pick the one that's right for you. And I spent my teenage years as I was going through that reflective process post my trauma, trying to figure stuff out, trying to get these answers to these big questions like, why is the world the way that it is? Why do things like this happen to people? And, the answers I came to, at least for me, in looking at all these religions, I read the Torah, the Bible, the Quran, the Upanishads, and several other things, and I was like, these are all really beautiful articles of clothing on a rack that don't quite perfectly fit me. They're beautiful. I'm like, oh, that's a really beautiful shirt, or wow, it's a really nice pair of pants. It just doesn't fit me perfectly. And so I wasn't sure what to call that back then. These days that would be called spiritual, but not religious. I feel like I'm a very spiritual person.
So that's what I was, it's like people associate, spirituality with religion, but you're saying that you can be spiritual and not belong to any, acting religion. But
you can exercise without playing a sport. You can be spiritual without being religious. It's the same thing. It's literally the exact same thing.
But also from the side of religious people, I in my life, I've always felt that they've almost like monopolized spirituality, because if you're spiritual and don't belong to religion X, Y, or Z, then you are not really spiritual, because you can't be.
Yeah. And, if you live in the UK and you like netball or American football, they're like, that's not a real sport. Like, football is a real sport. Soccer is a real sport, right? It's the same thing as like, the organized versions of these things tend to, become quite adamant that their particular sport, that their particular team is the only team, and if you're talking about like soccer in the UK or in Italy, it's not even just the sport. It's like a specific team, it's like, how dare you like Manchester United? Like,
that's my team, by the way.
Is it really? That was my dad's team too. Yeah. He was a Man U fan. I was an Arsenal guy growing up, but anyways, see, but people, I mean, that literally like get into fights at these games, right? Because, it's not even good enough to have the same sport, to like the same sport. You got to like this specific team.
Yeah.
And you see this in religion too, right? You see like, Protestants and Catholics going at it. It's like, well, aren't you playing the same sport? Aren't you both Christians? Or you see like Sufis and Muslims going at it. It's like, aren't you both Muslim? Like, why are you going at it with each other?
Yeah. And politics, parties are also supposed to be, you would think, on the same team. We're in the same country.
You'd think so. Yeah. But, people, humans get in the way. Yeah. What I try to explain to my kids is, because they ask the same questions. They're like, so I'm papa to them. I'm not dad. They're like, so papa, like, I feel spiritual. I feel connected to something bigger than myself. But like, I see all this weird stuff going on with religion. Like, and I'm like, you know what? Humans get in the way of being spiritual, and they try to pick teams, and they try to kind of like organize things and put down the other guys. And our team's the best team. And, you see this in exercise with sport and sports teams. And you see this in mental exercise, which is spirituality, and, the organized version of that, which is religion sometimes.
So do you feel like because of these spiritual questions that you always like reflecting on because of your childhood, situation or trauma, do you feel like you were subconsciously like exercising the, the reflection, the connection, and the inspiration part for yourself without reading the research, without speaking to the experts out there?
It's such a good question. I've thought about this a little bit, and I think I did, in kind of a not knowing kind of way. I always would go on these runs in nature as far back as I can remember, and I'd always like take a minute to appreciate something I saw. Usually like the thing that gets me is like either seeing like a sunrise or sunset or something on the water, and I'll just be like, I'll literally just stop my run and just be like, wow, that's awesome. Look at that. Like, look at the colors. It's awesome. Like, what a cool moment. And inspiration, tick, And then on my run, I'd be thinking certain things and deep thoughts and, reflection, tick. And then at some point during my day, I'd, try to reach out to somebody or be a good friend to somebody or whatever. Okay, like connection, tick. And so throughout my life, I've kind of done that, a little unconsciously, like not knowing that this is kind of like a checklist that helps you feel like literally healthier and happier, right? But I think that's kind of the point, is like most people don't know how the science of this works. Is if you do these things, the research says you're going to be like 80% happier and healthier. And so the question is like, how do you do that? How do you kind of systemize that? And that's really the entire point of soul, right? Is, the reason why, I decided to start Soul is, okay, there's this new kind of healthcare, spiritual healthcare.
How would you
That is,
first, before like that, like how would you describe Soul, the app?
yeah, it is an app that helps anyone anywhere in the world to feel more purposeful, healthier, and happier.
And that's Soul, SOL, right?
It's SOL. Yeah, so you can find us on getsoul.app. That's our website, GETSOL.app. Or if you just search for Soul on either the App Store or on the Google Play Store, we're the #1 result. Or if you even just search for Spirit, like now we're the #1 spiritual app and the #2 mental health app. And I think we're the #3 journaling app. And we've just kind of been, getting highly ranked in a lot of categories because people are finding us and finding that we help them in, being more purposeful, more spiritual, and, healthier and happier. But that was kind of the idea behind Soul is there's now this scientifically proven new way to become healthier and happier. It's just by doing more purposeful activity. So let's help people systemize that and, identify how to do something, reflective, something connective, and something inspirational every day. Right. And if we can do that, then, the science says we can potentially reverse a lot of these sad things that are happening in the world. Because to me, it's always striking, like, as a species, we are happier, or sorry, I should say we live longer than we've ever lived as a species. We are wealthier than we've ever been as a species. We have access to more tools. We're more powerful than we've ever been as a species. We have AI and we have smartphones and things like that. But we are less happy than we've ever been as a species. Explain that to me. How come if we have all these like materially significant good things happening to us, we live longer, we're richer, we're more powerful, we're not happy?
We jumped up the pyramid, Maslow's hierarchy.
That's right. That's right. And we've become less purposeful as a species. We're more distracted. There's so much information and it used to be really easy to kind of find purpose and like where you belong in the world, right? Like our parents' generation and generations going back 100,000 years is really easy. It's like you grew up in a town. Your family's there, your childhood friends are there. You're gonna, marry somebody from that town. Everybody goes to the same building or buildings a couple times a week to kind of get together and think about their purpose and meaning in life. And that's it. It's really simple. It was set. And now we grew up in this world
and everyone kind of had a role to play.
Yeah. There's like a functioning kind of, jigsaw puzzle in that community of how everybody fits together. And so it was really easy to feel purposeful and to feel like you belong because there's a structure for it. There's a system. And now we've grown up in this world where, the internet and global travel and, let's go to Bali, let's go to Mexico City, like, let's go there, let's read stuff about like Chinese traditions and whatever, astrology and Mayan stuff and African stuff. And so you get bombarded by all this information, which is great. Like, the world's opened up. But since we're all moving around, we don't live next to our parents or our childhood friends or our school chums or, and these days, even if you're working with somebody, like you're working with them like this, like you're not necessarily seeing them every day, right? And so it becomes a lot harder to find like your sense of purpose and belonging in life. And that's become a big problem.
It's and since COVID, it's like because of all the social distancing and everything, it's almost like, and I'm saying they, but society almost belittled whatever connections we did have pre-2020. For example, people saying that maybe we don't need the office to come together. Maybe we don't need, and I'm saying this in the context of us doing this online. And I wish that we could, meet up in the studio here and record, because I do feel the value. Like I enjoy podcasts a lot more when I'm with someone, in the same room. It's really like tremendously better. But everyone was predicting that we won't need to travel to meet people. We won't need to drive to meet people. You can just get a Zoom link or a Google Meet link and connect with them. And I think, and I think many other people, like quickly acknowledge that it's just not the same.
It's not the same.
And
Yeah.
it's like it's something like, missing from it. We don't know what to quantify or to point a finger really on what that thing is, but it's something missing. So so with Soul, it's very the app, it seems very, I'm going to use the word inclusive. To, you can kind of find your niche within spirituality, and use that. Is the purpose to like build that muscle inside of you, that part of the brain, using the app? Like, is like you have a an app, to get my list of exercises to strengthen my, to keep it simple, my my legs, in the gym. So is that the same idea as, for me to exercise my spirituality? First of all, I go, I wake up in the morning, I go to the app, and it's kind of where I kind of track my development and exercise routine.
You said it better than I could. I mean, that's the entire point of the app is, okay, if the science is right, that doing these things, doing, some reflection, some connection, some inspiration is a way to build spiritual muscle. And if by building that spiritual muscle, we're 80% less likely to experience all these bad things, anxiety, addiction, depression, and stuff like that. We're literally happier and healthier by doing these activities. Let's make it accessible for everybody. And let's make it so every unique person, no matter where they're from or what they're into, can organize and develop their own spiritual life. So if you grew up, my wife's Catholic, her family's Catholic, going back hundreds of years. Greek side of my family's Greek Orthodox, going back hundreds of years. You're raising kids together. Like, what do you do? And my wife likes some, astrology stuff. I like some Buddhist meditation stuff. Like, we kind of take pieces from all over the world. So how do you do that? Like, on a daily, like, where do you go to kind of organize that? That's what Soul is for, is like, no matter who you are, if you only like one thing, right? If you're like, hey, I'm really hardcore into Buddhism. Well, great. You can do that on Soul. That's fine. We're here for you. You've got the meditations and the communities and stuff like that. If you want to mix it up with some other things too, because you're like, you know what? I like some of this yoga stuff too. And some of that prayer stuff from over there is pretty nice. And I like some of this Taoist kind of yin yang stuff. Cool. You can do that too. And so, it's really, we're trying to be the world's most personalized spiritual utility and companion for you on your own spiritual journey. So you can build that muscle.
And do you get like some, is there educational resources within the app? So for example, I saw there's the Jewish Kabbalah category there. So can I go in there and learn about it? And
yeah.
And is that also like, is it material and content curated by your team, or is it different experts who pitch in their perspectives?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Is for each of these subjects and topics. So if it's a particular type of practice like meditation or prayer or food and nutrition, because different traditions have different things to say about food and how you should eat and how you should diet and things like that. It's like almost any topic in the world that's spiritually related, you can go into the app and dive really deep into it. And, for the different traditions and philosophies, we have a group of advisors at Soul. So, for example, Buddhism, we've got Professor Robert Thurman, he founded Tibet House in the US. He's the first ordained Buddhist monk in the United States. And he is a longtime professor at Columbia University and best friends of the Dalai Lama. And so he looks at all our Buddhist content and says, yeah, this is correct and accurate. And then beyond that, there are Buddhist communities that you can go and participate in, and everybody has their own little flavor and thing to say. And so you can dive really, really deep into any of these subjects if you want to learn more about them. Or if you already know a lot about them, then you can, participate in a community or host your own community and kind of go from there. So
it's and you're saying it's for everyone. Doesn't have to be. So how do we? It's like I've been suffering for a couple of years now from all these different new allergies in my life. And for any of the listeners that are bored of me mentioning my allergies, I'm sorry, but it's like something that I'm just keep trying to find a solution for. So something that I've now been, only a bit less than a week into is a 100% meat diet. That's all I'm to see if it makes a difference. And for 5 days, it has made a tremendously positive difference, in how I feel. Knock on wood. I hope that it stays that way. I was actually, on a side note, I was telling someone yesterday that a part of me hopes that it fails, because if it works, then I'm stuck with eating this way for the rest of my life. But it's something that it's so easy for me to either not try or quit after a couple of days, because it might take weeks, months, years to see results. And I can imagine even something like spirituality, again, that even I've experienced, because I do reflect, maybe not enough, but I do reflect, and I do connect, and I do seek inspiration, and I sometimes it's in running, sometimes meditation, sometimes it's helping people, and sometimes it's a bit of all the above. And I've felt those moments of like, just wow, like you mentioned, but it's easy to forget the next time when because you don't, it's not something that's an obvious benefit to you quickly. Like, if I calorie restrict, and if I do heavy weights for 1 month, I will see results, period, in the mirror. Very clear results. My neighbor would tell me how good I'm looking. My wife will be happy that I lost weight. But with the work of the spirituality muscle, I think it is more of a difficult sell, even if we put aside the negative connotation around the stigma, the stigma around the word.
100%, 100%. It's this is something that I don't want to say that we've solved it, this problem, because it is a problem. Like if you're a product designer, if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to build a product that people will like and engage with, and that creates value for them, right? And in this case, the value is, well, if you do this, you're going to get healthier and happier, right? That's kind of what the science says. But how do you do it? Like, how do you sort of like make it a thing that's top of mind and fun and engaging? And that's where the product design comes in, right? And I don't want to say that we've completely solved this at Soul, but we've found ways that like are interesting to users to do, right? So for example, when you join Soul, you have your own little Soul avatar, your SOL avatar. It's your soul. It's like your own little Jiminy Cricket. If you're familiar with Pinocchio, the wooden boy would have Jiminy Cricket on his shoulder, trying to help Pinocchio navigate the world and become, a more conscious kind of person and a real boy at the end of the story. And so, that's what your soul is intended to do. And when you do purposeful activities in the app, your soul glows brighter and bigger. And so it's kind of like, I don't know if you remember Tamagotchi dolls from, the 90s. You'd have a little doll, and you have to feed it and kind of do certain things.
Everyone's first baby.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so that's kind of how we've designed, Soul is, when you do purposeful activity, you're taking care of and nurturing your soul, and it glows brighter and it makes you happier. And so people come back to take care of their soul. And, it helps to build that muscle memory, that little reminder of, hey, try to do this like on a regular basis, because it's good for you.
Yeah. And it's, and the app is free, right? Is it?
It's free. We do have kind of like, I'd say almost like an Amazon-like kind of approach to things, which is that it's free. There's a Prime version. So on Amazon, if you subscribe to Prime, you get some extra benefits. You get quicker delivery and access to videos and things like that. So there's a premium tier of Soul. I'd say 95% of our content is free, but to make it a little bit smoother of an experience, like maybe you want to subscribe. And then beyond that, you can book things on Soul. So you can book classes with spiritual experts. You can book like a meditation session. You can book like a yoga session. You can book like an Akashic Records thing. You can book a tarot card reading, an astrology reading, take courses on how to like do different things, how to use crystals, and how to do a whole bunch of things. So whatever it is you're into, you can find it, on Soul.
The journey of spirituality is also one that I am on, as I mentioned, and it's one that I prepare myself to be on for the rest of my life. It's like I think you used the word fitness, and fitness is something that fluctuates, and that very easily it could be like if you're running in the forest every day, that's great. But if you stop for a month, you're taking, you're starting from zero the next time you pick it up. So do you feel like, in your life that spirituality is that way? Like it's something that you need, like polish on a regular basis. Otherwise, like running, it's something that you can lose. And when I say lose, even with running, and I think scientifically there is still like some muscle memory. So if you stop running for a month, it's easier for you to pick it up than someone who's never ran in their lives. But is that the fluctuation still there, do you think, with spirituality?
100%. Like if I look at my, pattern, my emotional pattern, over subsequent, over the last months or years, like when do I feel most fulfilled and happiest and at peace? And when am I the best version of myself? It's when I'm consistently doing purposeful or spiritual activity. It's when I'm consistently showing up for people I care about and being there as a good friend, son, husband, father, boss, coworker. When I'm being that version of myself and ticking the connection box, when I'm ticking that inspiration box and doing things that inspire me, whether it's listening to music or spending time in nature or doing things like that, or when I'm doing that reflection activity, that morning run, when I'm doing those things, I feel like I'm at my best. I'm at my most fulfilled. I'm at my happiest. I'm not anxious. I'm relaxed about things. I'm joyful, right? And at times when I sort of suffer and struggle, when I'm a little bit just distracted and anxious and stressed out and snappy, it's when I'm not doing those things. And so, at least for me, there's like a really clear correlation of, if you do spiritual activities, like you tend to feel better and you tend to feel healthier. And that's what it's all about.
So those are all good metrics for people to pay attention to, just like the size of your muscles or the, percentage of your fat in the mirror when you're working out. Those are all good metrics for people to reflect on and, pay attention to. Like, hey, I have been doing this reflection thing for a couple of weeks and I haven't been as snappy with my kids, my wife, my neighbors. Which I think I think those points are very important for people to know, because I don't think that people maybe know that they can be not snappy. Like, if someone's in their equilibrium where they think their status quo is emotionally, then maybe there's no going up or down from that. So I think these little KPIs are important. I was going to ask you.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add one thing. I think you're so right. And I mean, it's easy to get sidetracked because life gets in the way, right? Like, I mean, life just gets in the way. Okay, I got this stuff to do at work, and then I got this other thing I got to do, and I got this other responsibility, and you're running.
Or someone texts you something.
Totally. Somebody sends you something and it sets you off and you're like, oh my God, this person again? What's going on? Like, come on, are you serious? Right? And so it's really easy for life to get in the way and for you to lose track of what matters. And what matters is show up for yourself, right? Do a little bit of reflection, right? Try to understand like where you're at emotionally and, personality wise too. Like, who am I, right? Show up for the people in your life who matter and that you care about. Do that connection thing. And then show up, for your own sense of like wonder and meaning. Like, try to do things that inspire you, right? And if you can do those things on a repeated basis, you will be, like, statistically, scientifically, you'll be healthier and happier. You'll feel better. You'll feel more joyful. You'll be healthier. You'll be less anxious, less depressed. So.
Yeah, very good. So I was going to ask you, also, you mentioned a couple of times that your father passed away recently, which I'm sorry about. But that must have been a heavy weight to pick up in the gym when it comes to spirituality. And so did you feel equipped when that moment came?
I did. And the song that I wrote about him is called Milky Way, and the reason why I called it that and those words came to me is, I'm the type of person, I tend to rely on science a lot to understand all of those three elements we talked about before, like reflection. Like, why is reflection good? Like, what does that do to your brain? And let me understand the science behind this. Like, why is connection good? Why is being compassionate to other people good? Why is feeling connected to something bigger than yourself and inspired. Why is that good? Scientifically, right? And so, with respect to my father's passing, the way that I've, come to understand what death means is, when somebody passes, you miss them, right? They are okay. And I'll talk more about that in a second, why I say that they're okay. But it's you who suffers because you miss them. You miss being able to speak with them, to have them near you, to feel their presence, to hold their hand, to share a joke, to have those moments. You miss them. And that's why death is painful, right? But if you think about it from a scientific perspective, every subatomic particle in our body has been around since the beginning of time, since the Big Bang, right? We have literally, every single subatomic particle in your body has been around since the Big Bang. In fact, every drop of blood in your body has a piece of iron in it. And the only place in the universe that iron gets made is when stars explode. So you literally are made of star stuff, literally, like scientifically, okay? And when we die, we just go back into that. Like we're sort of, probabilistically so lucky to even be alive. Like think about how vast the universe is, right? It's this massive, massive thing that we can't even comprehend with our brains. Like we're so ill-equipped to think about how big the universe is that we don't even know like how far Mars is, right? So if you were to drive a car at the speed that you drive on a highway, straight from here to Mars, imagine there's a road going from Earth to Mars, our closest planet, our closest neighbor. How long do you think it would take you to get there?
Oof, I'm going to guess like 2,000 years.
Close, 60,000 years.
So not that close, but yes.
I mean, no, but I mean, you're in the thousands of years. Some people are like 8 days and you're like, no, not quite. Right. So like we have a really hard time understanding big numbers as humans. And so the universe is so impossibly huge. We can't even imagine it. In that massive universe, which is mostly space, right? Somehow all of these atoms and subatomic particles that make up us came together, and we're fortunate enough to be like a human for a short period of time, like not a piece of dirt or like a cockroach or something. Like we get to be humans for a little bit of time. That's awesome. We get to think things and kind of do things. And then, when we pass away, we just go back into that. We literally go back into the earth, or you get cremated and you go back into the universe. And so, I wrote this song about my dad about like, we'll meet again someday, somewhere out there in the Milky Way. I'm going to miss you. Right. But I know that you're okay. And, we'll get to see each other again someday. So, it's, death is never easy to process, but it shouldn't be a sad thing. It should be a thing that helps you reflect on the miracle that is life, really, more than anything else.
Beautiful. My last question to you, which is one that I ask every guest on the podcast, is like, what is something that stands out in your life? It can be personal or professional, that you've changed your mind on, something that you used to think very strongly about, but actually shifted perspective. It could be as of yesterday or as of whenever. And the reason is, again, to promote that. That's what we should be doing, really. We shouldn't be married to any of our beliefs or opinions, which a lot of us are. So we want to share as many of changed ones as we can.
Yeah, man, I've changed my mind probably 5 times since breakfast today. You know what I mean? Like new information comes along so quickly these days that it's very easy to change your perspective on things based on new facts. Let's see. I'd say something that's been very hope inspiring to me is that people are kinder than you might think. People are less indifferent than you might think. And, when you open yourself up as a person, I used to be the kind of person, and friends of mine would complain to me about this, that say, Nazar, like, you're a really good listener as a friend, and you seem to have no trouble talking and, sort of articulating different points, but you don't really open up very much and sort of share, the not so good stuff in your life. You don't sort of, open yourself up to be vulnerable to other people. And I think for a long time I wouldn't do that because I just wasn't expecting people to like really care, you know. Um, and I've been surprised in my life, pleasantly surprised, that like when you do open yourself up, when you do share what's on your mind, even the stuff that's might sound uncomfortable, right? Traumas and things like that you've gone through, people are far more understanding and kinder than you might think, right? And just by being vulnerable, you open up that vulnerability in other people where they feel that there is space to share things about themselves. And when you can share things that are vulnerable about yourselves, you connect, you become closer to one another. And that's really what this is all about, right? Is trying to foster, closer, kinder, more compassionate connections with other humans, right? That's part of what life is all about. It's part of what spirituality is all about. So, that's been something that, I think I've definitely changed. I've changed my approach and perspective on that subject over time.
Excellent. So Nazar Yasin, I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you for being here today with me. Thank you for sharing, your personal story and some really personal things about your life and your mission with Soul, which I am very excited to keep using. I mentioned I've been using it for a few days, and I'll continue exploring through the app and seeing the different options there, and really trying to reflect on what it, the relationship with it, what it's doing for me, and I'll recommend it to my friends and family to at least test out or at least think about. But I this will stay with me, this interview, because I like how we very simply like put down spirituality into these 3 pillars, which really helps just comprehend what spirituality really means and how you can work on and build spirituality, which I'm hoping is also extremely useful for our listeners. So thank you very, very much.
No, Danny, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed the conversation. You're a super swell, genuine guy. I really enjoyed conversing with you, and really appreciate it. Look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Me too. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care.